Order. And so we do have a change, and that is consent agenda. We will delete item 7.3, addition of Surgery Plus program through Employer Direct Healthcare at the request of Lindsay Maxey, Program Director in Human Resources. And Superintendent's Human Resources recommendations deleted item 8.8, employee suspension, at the request of Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. And so then I would need a motion to approve the agenda as amended tonight. And so that brings us to Section 3, which is recognition of Choctawhatchee High School's competitive cheer team, 2023 Florida High School Athletic Association State Champions Small Co-Ed Division, presented by Mr. Chambers. And 3.2 will be recognition of Shalimar Elementary School's archery team as the 2023 state champs in the National Archery State Program Elementary School Division, presented by Superintendent Chambers. Bringing us down to Section 4, administrative personnel appointments. Tonight we won't have any of those. Section 5, public comment, agenda items only. That would be our blue card edition, and we don't have any of those to date. Section 6 will be committee and staff reports, workshop only. Section 7, consent agenda. First, as we said, would be approval of the agenda. 7.2, approval of the minutes of the student disciplinary hearing of March 27, 2023, minutes of the workshop meeting of March 27, 2023, and minutes of the regular meeting of March 27, 2023. 7.3, appropriation of District 1 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Longwood Elementary School for Clear Touch panels in the amount of $4,937, presented by Dr. White. 7.4, appropriation of District 3 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Florosa Elementary School for painting in the amount of $6,606.20, presented by Ms. Ivanchik. 7.5, invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Julie Perry, Chief Financial Officer. 7.6, school donations, presented by Julie Perry. 7.7, Resolution 23-04, authorizing the approval of a First Amendment to lease schedule for certificates of participation by our school board, Master Lease Program, 2022A, adding certain roofing and other projects that may be financed with the proceeds, presented by Julie Perry. 7.8, authorization to appropriate federal impact aid funds and make a payment in the amount of $56,058 to charter schools, presented by Julie Perry. 7.9, fiscal year 2023-2024 child care fees, presented by Julie Perry. 7.10, proposed school operational support staffing grid and school supplement grid, discretionary budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. 7.11, tag-on bid purchase over $50,000 for Train, presented by Vince Wyndham, Program Director for Purchasing. 7.12, certification of the Okaloosa County School District Facilities FISH data for 2023, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Program Director, Facilities Planning. 7.13 was deleted, as we said earlier. Section 8, Superintendent's Human Resources recommendations. 8.1 is information only, employees on administrative leave, presented by Dr. Hale. 8.2, information only, deferred retirement option program, DROP, presented by Dr. Hale. 8.3, employment separations, presented by Dr. Hale. 8.4, personnel recommendations. 8.5, employee transfers. 8.6, employee suspension. 8.7, employee suspension. 8.8 was deleted, as stated earlier. 8.9, leave without pay, presented by Dr. Hale. Section 9, discussion agenda. At this point, nothing has been moved there. Section 10, construction program owners representatives business. 10.1 would be the program status report by Mr. Bryant. 10.2, authorization for professional services agreement from Faithful and Gould for price validation for program number 6, task order number 16, phase 2, roofing and canopy projects at Chattahoochee High School and Lewis School K-8. 10.3, approval of the selection committee for RFQU 23-01 construction cost engineering consulting services, presented by Dr. Smith. 10.4, program number 6, task order number 11, district-wide sales tax roofing projects prime contract change order, presented by Dr. Smith. 10.5, program number 6, task order number 12, district-wide sales tax construction projects prime contract change order. 10.6, program number 6, task order number 14, Fort Walton Beach High School Boys Field House Roof Project prime contract change order. 10.7, program number 6, task order number 9, time and materials, emergency remedial efforts, both design and construction, for repairs to Jack Foster Stadium at Crestview High School, prime contract change order.
May I step, would it be okay if I asked Dr. Smith to come
Sure.
up about that?
Sure.
Dr. Smith, if you don't mind. I just want, if you don't mind clarifying about, this says emergency remedial efforts. Can you kind of explain to me, because we've worked on that stadium several times, so what's happening there?
This is the closing out of the repairs that we did. We started like a year and a half ago to fix the deficiencies at the stadium. This is closing that project out, bringing that money back.
Okay, so there's nothing, no new problems?
No new
That's
problem.
what-
It's
yeah.
actually closing it out and bringing the money back that was not spent on the remediation of that program.
And while I have you, so would you mind speaking just in general? I know our stadiums have been a concern. We've had, the Choctaw Stadium was repaired, so are we looking pretty good with our major stadiums now?
We're doing very well. Matter of fact, we're doing the state requires us to do an inspection on our stadiums every 2 years. We are now doing an inspection on our stadiums every year. We're doing all our facilities every 2 years, but our stadiums every year, and they're getting in much better shape.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
That brings us to 10.8, program number 6, task order number 18, time and materials, repair soffit at Destin Elementary School, prime contract change order. 10.9, program number 6, task order number 26, time and materials, asbestos abatement of the Central Administrative Complex in Niceville, Florida, prime contract change order. That brings us to section 11, attorney's business. 11.1, consideration of recommendations, updates, requests, and pending legal matters.
Yes, ma'am. I have one request this morning. I'd like to ask that the chairman schedule a attorney-client session prior to our next board workshop. We need to discuss a litigation matter with the board that is currently pending in case number 2021 CA 001267, which is in the Circuit Court of the First Judicial Circuit in Okaloosa County, and we propose that special meeting be conducted at 8:30 on the 24th prior to the workshop.
Got it. Thank you. And that brings us to section 12, superintendent's business.
Thank you, Madam Chair and School Board. I want to give a couple updates, especially as it pertains to the student services area. As you know, mental health is something that we've really focused on with our students, but it's also something that we focus on with our employees as well. I wanted to give an update to the board on where we are with our youth mental health first aid training, and that is a requirement from the state, and by June 30, 80% of all employees in Okaloosa County have to have this youth mental health first aid training. Now, what's interesting about this is it is a lengthy process. You can only have 30 participants in the room at one time. So you start thinking about 30 participants, 3,500 employees, how many trainings that is. And I just want to thank Terry Schroeder, our youth mental health first aid counselors in the Student Services Department. This has been a multi-year project, as you can imagine. But currently, we sit at approximately 75% of our employees that have been trained. So we're right on target to hit over the 80% mark by June 30th. Just wanted to give the board that update with mental health being such a priority. And I do want to say that this training, just a quick description, it is an early intervention public education program as it pertains to youth mental health first aid, but it also helps our employees to recognize the signs and symptoms that suggest a potential mental health or substance abuse challenge. So you couple this with helping our employees become even more knowledgeable. You couple that with the mental health initiatives that we have at the schools, Hope Squad that we have. We've added mental health counselors at the school level, so it's just a continual layering process of trying to get even better in the youth mental health first aid area. Also, I just wanted to give an update to the board on where we are. As you remember, Mayor J.B. Whitten, he came to the board and gave us an update on the opioid crisis nationwide, how that is impacting Florida, but also fentanyl. So we did have Mrs. Lamb and Ms. Schroeder. They met with Mayor Whitten after that board workshop, and in essence, he asked for three things. One, he asked for a district representative to sit on the Okaloosa County Community Health Improvement Partnership, and Ms. Schroeder will do that for us. Two, he asked for a district and North End representative to join his opioid task force. Ms. Lamb will do that with Mrs. Tu on the North End. And then three, he asked for education plan for students. And that's something that we're working on once the DOE requirements come out in this area, because they're working on something as well, then we'll implement that accordingly. So we'll be able to hit the three areas that he's asked for. Also wanted to keep the board just up to speed on the parent meetings that we're having throughout the district. We have 3 more that will be coming. We'll be hitting and meeting with parents in the Crestview area on April 18th and on May 17th, and then another one in Fort Walton Beach on April 26th. The fireside chats that we're having with students. We had our first one at Fort Walton Beach High School this past week, and I'll say it was excellent. Myself and Marty Gardner met with about 5 students, and it was a small meeting, but a powerful meeting. And you would have been very impressed with these young ladies and young men. But a couple of the areas that they spoke about, we spoke intensively about school safety and how they felt about school safety, and I'm happy to report to you that they feel very good. They noticed measures that are in place at the school level. So we had a conversation about school safety. We also talked about ways to help students become more knowledgeable on what the CTE courses have to offer. You know, they gave us some suggestions about even maybe using a QR code that students could click, get more information about a particular CTE course, which would help them become more knowledgeable, knowing exactly what they would like to do. So I thought that was a great suggestion. So we'll be investigating how we might do that even better for our kids. They also talked about vaping, and it's something that they do not like. And so they already knew a little bit about our vaping initiative. They asked about the vaping detection devices, and they were happy to see that that was going to be installed. And then lastly, we had a strong conversation just on mental health in general and what we can continue to do for students. They do recognize that students do struggle in that area, and they were appreciative to know that we had a good conversation about the things that we do have in place for students. But it was a deep conversation, especially when we got into the mental health aspect for students. And they were extremely poised, mature young men and women. So it was nice to see that and have that conversation. I'd like to give the board an update in 2 areas. Our job fair, so I'd like Dr. Hale to come up and do that. And then I'm going to have Mr. Horton and Ms. Lightboard prepared an update on some legislative priorities of in terms of where legislation is right now, just to give the board and the public that update.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I am happy to come here and report to you a very successful job fair that was conducted on April 1st, right next door over at Edge Elementary. Many different components to the job fair were added this year, which are going to prove to be successful as we continue to gather information as to the connections that we made and the networking opportunities and the different vacancies that we hope to fill. The day started off, well, actually, it started with pre-registration. We had 148 people register ahead of time to show up. We had over 200 on the day. We had a lot of unknown registrants show up, and we were able to serve them as well. So we know that we had well over 200 people in the building at a given time. But of the 148 pre-registrants, 140 of them showed up, registered, and signed in, and I happen to think I know what happened to the other 8 because a lot of the principals told me that they had contacted such and such and they won't be coming to the job fair, but don't worry, they're gonna have a job and things like that. Our principals are pretty shrewd about things like that, especially when we put resumes out there and contact information ahead of time like we did. So a lot of people traveled through that day. They showed up. The first thing that happened was the superintendent welcomed everybody with his typical inspiring champion for education way that he does, and we did receive a lot of feedback just based on that. They were very impressed that the superintendent took the time to show up and cared enough to do that. We got some specific feedback from some folks that had attended other job fairs and said, you know, it's already starting off better than anything that we've been to so far, just for that reason. So we appreciate him showing up and doing that. Of the 148 people that we had pre-registered, 74 of them identified themselves as specifically for instructional purposes. Now, there were more that included that they were seeking jobs, maybe instruction, maybe ed support, multiple clicks. But in terms of just single-click applicants, 74 indicated that they were interested in being teachers. 40 of those came with Florida certifications, so we're excited about that. And that's just the pre-registrants. I don't have the data on the day show-ups for that yet. We'll be sure to bring that to you as we gather that information. But our marketing really seemed to work ahead of time, so we were excited about that. Many of the people that were eligible to be hired were of the career changer variety. Some were of the recent graduate variety. We did have some recent or very near to graduating, you know, in May or something of this year. We had several of those come as well. 20 of our participants, this is very exciting, 20 of our participants during that day came from the typically hard to hire ed support category, custodian, parapro. Some of those were actually hired on the day for 22-23 position vacancies, so we were excited about that. We had our HR staff over there with application stations set up so that we could work with people right there on the day, and we actually found people and got them placed and hired then too. So not just 23-24, but current vacancies as well. So that was good. We did offer some commitments. As you know, the superintendent has wanted us over the last 3 years to more or less get ahead of the curve and get commitments for people that we knew we were going to have positions for, and we were able to execute several of those on the day, 5 specifically that I remember, and we have what I will call the pink sheet for. 2 at Kenwood, 2 at Antioch, and 1 at Elliott Point. So we were excited to go ahead and get some teachers committed for those 23-24 positions, and many principals still owe me some pink sheets as we collect that data. They had interviews on the spot. They set up interviews the following week, and like I said, there were 8 no-shows that I think we'll get pink sheets on pretty quickly as well. So getting our arms around the people as soon as possible to fill our vacancies is a strategy that we have employed over the last several years, and we think we're going to have some success there as well. Besides just the schools, we had 5 district departments actually attend as well. Of course, my folks from HR and risk management were there. We had ESE folks, maintenance folks, transportation, and CTE. 2 of the people that we hired on the day was a transportation assistant and a bus driver, so we were excited about that. And it was good to have those district departments represented there as well. Just some other notes. As soon as Mr. Chambers was done welcoming all the candidates, we divided everyone up into their categories, so to speak. We sent the ed support people to one location where they could ask some questions and get their applications started. We sent the people that were Florida certified to the job fair to go ahead and start meeting with the principals, and then we kept the rest of the instructors that were there that were maybe in some, I'll call it limbo. They were either going to be a career changer or a recent graduate, someone who was needing to know how to navigate the certification process, and our professional services department was there to answer all of their questions, give all of their information about how to go through the certification process, and we got really, really good feedback on that as well. The one other thing that I would like to say in terms of information that we were able to get to these participants is something that we're going to be doing this week. We were able to put a homebuyer seminar flyer in everyone's hands, because one of the things that we've identified as a barrier to transitional education applicants is the housing market. And, we don't have a whole lot of control over that, but what we do know is that we've got some resources in the community, specifically our local Realtors Association, that can talk to young home buyers, first-time home buyers, teacher benefits and bonuses, or whatever it is that they have that create incentives for educators to move to our areas. And we're going to have that home buyer seminar actually this week, Thursday, at 4 o'clock right here in this room, and we're starting to get a lot of people call about that. So anything that we can do to remove a barrier, make it easier, get our arms around these folks and get them to our area, whether they be a certified teacher that's looking to transition, which we had a lot of people, not only from our surrounding counties that were already teachers, but we actually had people from as far north as Ohio and as far south as Orlando, specifically coming to our job fair because they've heard not only about how nice our area is, but how well our school system is run, the things that you guys have done over the last several years to incentivize the teaching profession, from our benefit package to our salaries and everything like that. We know that we have a good competitive deal, and the word's getting out. And so any barrier we can eliminate, we're going to try to do that. So this home buyer seminar.
And Dr. Hale, I would just share, and perhaps you guys are going to cover this in your legislative update, but this morning there was a blip on local news about some home buying incentives that are going to be offered by the Florida legislature to maybe give some assistance to folks that are looking for a career in education and teaching. So hopefully that'll be something that will help us, because as we know, housing is an issue for our new folks particularly.
Absolutely, and I do appreciate you saying that. The gentleman that we have coming in to conduct this seminar, and I've sent the flyer out through social media a couple of times through the Human Resources page, and I would actually ask anybody that can share it to share it, because it does talk about all the different things that will be covered, and I'm quite certain that will be a piece of it, because the realtors have their eyes on this very, very closely as well. And just one more thing, if I could just give a shout out to Edge Elementary for hosting us again.
Yeah.
They go out of their way to provide us an opportunity to kind of invade their space on Friday afternoon and Saturday, and so my hat's off to Ms. Curley and Ms. Anderson over there, their administrative team for helping us out, and of course my HR girls who put everything together and executed a very well-run job fair. So I can answer any questions, or I can step aside and get out of the way, whatever you'd like.
Thank you, that's great. That's good to hear that. Good news.
I just echo that and say that I too heard that announcement this morning on the news, and I believe it was that Hometown Heroes program that they were touting actually. So
Yes,
good, good to know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hale. And as Mr. Horton prepares to come forward, I do want to say, I just want to thank the HR department. They did a great job. It was very well organized, but also the fact that we had all the departments there. Every school was there, even if they didn't have a position, because they knew they still wanted to be able to meet these folks and greet them. So I really appreciated that. But a lot of hard work went into this job fair.
Good morning, board members, and Ms. Lightbourne's here to join me as well. So we wanted to give you an update on kind of the most impactful legislation that's been signed by the governor already, and that's House Bill 1. It was signed on March 27th. It's 140 plus pages long, so we'll go into some of the specifics where we think Okaloosa is most impacted in some ways that offer us more flexibility, and in some other more challenging ways. And obviously, as we move through the rest of the school year and into the summer, we'll be dissecting all of this to make sure the impact for Okaloosa is minimal if it's negative and optimal if it's positive. The first thing that the House Bill 1 did, and it's the Universal Voucher Program, the Family Empowerment Scholarship. We've spoken about this a number of times at the board meetings. It does, House Bill 1 does eliminate financial eligibility and enrollment cap for the number of families who can participate. So essentially, the rule, the law now is all Florida resident students K-12 can participate in the Family Empowerment Scholarship. There had previously, and this is, the original voucher system grew out of McKay scholarships for ESE students and some other things. It expanded to include military children the last couple of years, and now all income levels for qualifying are removed. There are priorities that the legislature says that you want to prioritize families that are within, I think, 400% of the federal poverty level, but it doesn't exclude anybody. And so really it's kind of an open end as to the impact of what's going to happen. We've seen it in Okaloosa County. Our projections for this upcoming school year for unweighted FTE, and remember that's roughly equated to a student, but not necessarily, is 1,784.70 unweighted FTE that we have to project in our finance model, our FEFP model, to tell the state how many we believe that there will be in Okaloosa County this upcoming school year, right?
So will you take questions now, or would you prefer later?
They're probably all the way throughout, Dr. White.
Well, I would just ask, first of all, are those 1,700 students, are those perhaps students that are already enrolled outside of the system?
Absolutely.
Right.
There may be some that have spent their entire careers with their parents' choices at a private
Right.
school.
And so that doesn't mean that automatically we're going to lose 1,700 students. I mean, these are students that are already not with us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And there could be others coming.
Well, that's right.
There could be others
We
coming, but a
understand.
lot of these students, and we track for any student who was attending a public school, we have the ability to see when they left to go to a private school under the voucher program. So we track that information. And then again, the other thing that it does is it authorizes the vouchers for use for private school tuition and homeschooling resources. So that's a piece that is interesting to look at, as a student can be a homeschool student and still qualify for resources if state guidelines are followed. And so it's a 140-page bill. There are a lot of things that have to be done, but it is something that is now opened up to families who are interested in homeschooling their children can get resources through this Family Empowerment Scholarship Program.
But now, as I took a look at some of that's a fairly rigorous endeavor. It's families that choose to access this funding through homeschooling. I mean, there's a process for that, if I remember correctly.
There is, sir. There are a lot of checks and balances in there and requirements that placed on parents to make sure
That's right.
that things are done well. So it's not, I'm just going to bring my
Right.
kid home and get a check. That's not how it works.
Mhm.
The other thing that was in this particular piece is it requires the Department of Education to create an online portal for parents to see every educational option available. So these are taken from that bill. So DOE was responsible for creating that portal that would give parents that information of all options that are available to them.
And are we moving from this?
If we're ready to.
I just want to add one thing, just
Good
so the board knows. So these family empowerment scholarships have been a challenge for budgets. We have been in contact with our local senators and representatives, and we've talked about the impact to school budgets, not only for Okaloosa County, but for all the other 66 districts as well. And in this new budget that's going to be coming forward, we're hopeful that the family empowerment scholarships would come outside of the funding program, but we'll see. And it's something that is provides options and choices for parents, which is fine. But we'd like to see it outside of the funding model due to the impact that it has on school district budgets. So we've had good conversations with our local legislators, and they've been great in this conversation and others. But it's just something that we hope to see, and we'll find out whether that happens.
Okay, I have a question about the private school tuition. Does it pay 100%? Is that what you're saying? So whatever,
No,
whatever?
ma'am, no, ma'am, it would not. I think there are various tuition amounts for private schools out there, and I wouldn't get too much into the weeds on it now, but there's a funding amount per student that might be available to a family, and whether or not that meets the private school tuition dollar amount could, in some cases, may not in others. So-
Well, that sounds to me like the fine print that parents need to know, that if that voucher may not pay, fine print may not pay all the fees depending upon where they choose.
Well, and to Dr. White's point earlier, you've got a body of students that are sitting in private schools right now whose parents over the years are accustomed to paying tuition for that enrollment. I think this program now allows them, in essence, to be subsidized that cost, so.
Although, I would add, and I saw an interview to this effect, not all private schools are willing to accept these funds due to the fact that they don't want to have some of the entangling alliances that may accompany these funds that we certainly have to deal with.
Yes, sir. And to follow up on that, when we look at our students in Okaloosa County and where they're attending these private schools under these programs, we do see a wide range of the current schools in Okaloosa County appear to have gotten on board, at least up until this year, with the requirements to take part in that FES program.
And is this the definition private school, this is, would be all, like religious sponsored schools? You know what I'm saying, like backed by,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, okay. So anything that's non-public, in other words?
Well, they would have to be approved as an offering, and we don't do, as a school district, we don't do the approval. But I would say there are current schools in Okaloosa County that you would recognize that are all taking part in this program right now.
Okay, thanks.
Did you say all the private schools are taking part?
No, sir. No.
Oh,
I said
oh.
there are schools that we probably have a number that are not, and maybe they're
Right.
small, but there are many of them that are currently have students enrolled under the Family
Right,
Empowerment
right.
Scholarship Program.
So, Madam Chair, I have a question. So, Mr. Horton, I think I came in on the tail end of a question that might have been asked, but I think the biggest challenge to this whole bill has been, in my opinion, is accountability. So how are these, when the money is actually given up, the accountability piece there, how are we going to be able to keep up with the money that's given out to make sure that it's going to where it's supposed to be going? Is it already earmarked for it has to go? I heard you say something that's just, we're just not going to
Well-
hand out a check.
Well, so Ms. Perry is not responsible for funding these private entities and
Right.
keeping track of that. We do a projection as a school district inside of the FEFP funding model as to how many unweighted FTE of students we believe are going to take advantage of the scholarship. So when we project that amount, that funding then does come to the district, right? But it never goes from the district straight to the private schools. What happens is when we do our student counts and we find out in October where the students really are, then the state will come back and they will pull that funding back and they will allocate it.
Right.
And so then the accountability piece would fall to them for how much money somebody gets and what those folks are doing. But we
Okay.
don't have any oversight over the operations of those private schools in terms of
Okay,
accountability.
so let me go ahead and rephrase the question then, because I probably should have said it this way to begin with. So just like public schools have an accountability piece, which is more stringent than any other educational piece out there, where is the accountability with charter and public or private schools? What's going to be their accountability?
Well, So if you're asking me, are the private schools now going to be required to do all of the state assessments that our children have to do? At the end, I've not seen anything in legislation that requires them to do that.
Okay.
So I don't expect that to be in place for those private schools.
But that's only if they take the money too, right? If they take money, then they could possibly be, like Dr. White just said, entangled in what might be required
Yeah,
for us.
And there's a lot of rule that's going to be written about this as we move into the summer and the fall, and that will identify some of the particulars that happen in that situation. But I wouldn't.
And I would say
present that to you
right now, there's no indication that charter schools or private schools would be following the same rules as our traditional public schools and school district has to follow.
And the piece that I looked at wasn't about the schools. It was regarding homeschooling. And if I remember, I think there was a testing requirement for students that were being homeschooled and receiving these funds. I don't know if it was like ours or not, but there was some piece there that basically supports what you said, Mr. Horton. It's not just a matter of getting a check. There are requirements in place for students that are homeschooled and participate in this program.
Yes, sir. And there are requirements now for homeschool students to have an annual evaluation and produce that to our office where we look at that. They're relatively loose requirements historically in terms of having a portfolio that might present that a student made a year's worth of growth. And so what comes out of rulemaking for this upcoming year, but it is going to be, there's a lot more involved this year with the homeschool piece.
The home, and I know what you're talking about, Dr. White, the homeschool piece, they did have something in print that it would either be our assessment or some other assessment, and that there would also be an account that would be set up, that the money would be put in, that they could use for very specific things. So, yeah, there are a lot of pieces to that piece, but again, as Mr. Horton said, once it goes through rulemaking, then I think we'll see more of exactly what the accountability pieces are, but it did look like it would be quite tedious, yes.
I also have some concerns that, and I know you said the rules are coming, so we can get off them, but if the parent thinks that going with the private school student gets the voucher, and then that doesn't work, and they want to come back to the public
That was a
school,
question, yeah.
that is going to be quite an entanglement there, won't it?
Well, there was a question about.
It'll be interesting.
About the funding.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the issue,
Yeah.
about the funding's allocated, and then how does the funding follow the student back to the public school? Now,
Yeah, what a mess.
If they choose it to
They
do the
did,
way
probably.
that they could, then it would be based on time in, time out. But who
Well,
knows
one
how
of the
they'll
things
do
you
that.
heard on that topic, one of the things you heard Mr. Horton say is, when we look at those 1,700 students, we're funded for that, so that money flows to the school district. And then it eventually flows back to the state. But from the way that we understand it right now, and this is what we spoke to our local legislators about, is, and let's just say that $1,000 is what a student's worth, and you know that that's not the case.
Yeah.
But when that $1,000 comes, it comes in our general fund, it also comes in categoricals. And let's just say 700 of those dollars is general, 300 is categorical. When it's pulled back, the full 1,000 is just pulled from general, not the categoricals.
Oh.
And many of those students aren't even students who were ever in Okaloosa. So for Ms. Perry, the difficulty is, and for us, is when those dollars are pulled back, I'll just say that's a challenge, because more is being pulled
Absolutely.
back in essence than what was received.
Well, it's being pulled out of general.
Correct.
And so that further complicates how we meet our obligations.
Which is why you were saying something about that should be the funding outside of the FEFP.
Yes, ma'am.
Versus that should be separate funding, that way it wouldn't be so complex in the coming and going.
Parents have the ability to have choices and have options. It would just be nice if this was outside of the funding formula.
Absolutely.
And I think the House and the Senate both understand this. The conversations that Mr. Chambers had with Senator Brox and others, they understand it. I think in their education bills, and they're coming into joint conference now to kind of wrangle out the final difference between the two budgets to present to the governor, is both House and Senate have a reserve set aside, from what I'm seeing, for Family Empowerment Scholarship. But it's all money, it's all coming from a pot of money, and so anything that's set aside for one thing is likely not to be available for something else. So I think there's a recognition that the funding model is not optimal right now for the school district.
All right, so this is the good news part of the bill. So as you know, our district has really advocated for many things to help teacher recruitment and retention. And so we thank Mr. Broxton for helping us with these initiatives. So the first one waives the general knowledge test. So that's the test that They have to pass the ELA, the math, et cetera. For teachers who have been rated effective or highly effective for the last 3 years. So that really affects our teachers who are coming in new, who haven't taken that test yet, but as they're teaching, they're getting either effective or highly effective. If they do that for 3 years, they don't have to take this test, and they don't have to pass it. So that's a help. That's a help, because our new teachers have so much to do. The next part also helps our teachers. It expands the temporary teaching certificate from 3 years to 5 years. So if you have an alternative cert teacher come in, they have to take courses on top of, they already have a degree, but they're courses in education that they have to take on top of our own professional development, and then just keeping their heads above water in a classroom, doing lesson plans, et cetera. So this would give them 5 years to do that versus 3 years, which we believe would be very, very helpful. That was one of our big initiatives. So very, very happy on that piece. And then it also requires the State Board of Education to develop and recommend additional repeals and revisions to the education code in the next, so not this legislative session, but it's requiring them to continue to look into the next legislative session to reduce regulations to public schools. So hopefully that's a good thing, going in our direction. Okay?
And I would just add, so Representative Meany, we met with all the representatives, all did a great job in supporting us on recruitment and retention. One of the things that we've yet to see out there that was a big ask, I know, in the area of HR, was the out-of-field piece. And so right now, someone can be a quality teacher and teach out-of-field for a year, but then they can't do it the following year. So we are asking for an extension of that, because as principals of schools, some of you know that hamstring is a school that's got a quality teacher, so if they're highly effective perhaps, but that, we haven't seen that piece yet.
And even on that topic, so you look at what teachers have to do right now. So we've talked about that youth mental health first aid training, ESE certification, and not just for an ESE teacher, for the general ed teacher, ESE certification, the ESOL certification, so and more. And all of these things in and of themselves are great, but when you look at a time where across the nation where you're trying to recruit and retain teachers, our conversations to our local legislators was, these are all great in and of themselves, but during this time, if we're able to ease off of some of this right now, it might help us get teachers and retain them as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. The next piece that we think is really great for our students is that it has removed the online credit requirement for graduation. So several years ago, they put that every student, in order to graduate, must have one online requirement. Well, everyone who went through COVID had that because we were online. But to continue forward, many of our students do that anyway, but it's now no longer a requirement for graduation, which
Good.
we think is a good thing. We also learned through COVID that face-to-face instruction is very, very important. So yes, some students did well online, but others didn't. So removing that requirement is a big deal.
And that was a nightmare for guidance counselors.
Yeah.
Keep up with making sure that student had an online. Correct.
The next one, it was interesting, and of course, Jay McGinnis has been tracking this very closely with his state transportation group. It expands transportation of students to include vehicles other than school buses. And there's another bill out there that's got a lot of information on it about it, but I just want to say, I don't anticipate a situation in which we'd come to the board and ask to transport students in anything other than school buses. They're the safest mode of transportation. I'm not sure if the genesis of this is out of the fact that we have a shortage of school bus drivers, and so they're trying to come up with other vehicles that maybe people who aren't school bus drivers can drive. Or there's some rural areas maybe where 10 or 12 passenger vans might be used in some areas. I just don't see a situation in which I would bring to the superintendent recommendation to not use school buses to transport our students. So we're tracking that closely, and I think Jay's state group has come up with many concerns about this in terms of maintenance and checks. We check our buses, I think, monthly, make sure they go through a safety inspection regularly. And so this whole piece right here just kind of has me kind of looking at it, but I don't think that we would be trying to take advantage of this situation.
I think you're right on the, talk about rural schools. I mean, there is some districts out there that do have vans, per se, that are like school bus vans, but it's because they have to go so far out, and it might be just a small group of kids that they have to pick up. It doesn't make sense to have a big bus for them. They just have that van, so.
The next two are things that actually improve the flexibility in Okaloosa County, so we're pleased. And they were just one-sentence add-ins to House Bill 1 that was signed by the governor, just making sure we bring to your attention. The third item there, the third bullet, exempts construction projects started on or before July 1 of 2026 from total cost per student station requirements. And that is something that Okaloosa, not being in the school construction business historically, the last 15 to 20 years, have not had to deal with, but other school districts have. And so as the cost of school construction has gone up, this concept of how many dollars you can spend to build a school was not keeping up with the cost of schools, actually. And it was tied to the Consumer Price Index, but it was never really sufficient. And so this allows the school district. So what it said was, if you're building a school that costs X, you're allowed to spend your 1.5 capital outlay money, but you can't spend X. You can spend X minus something. So if it was a $50 million school, you can only spend $30 million of it from your capital outlay budget. The other $20 million had to come from some other voter-approved source, like a sales tax. But it made it less. It made districts have less flexibility. So for Okaloosa, this is a good thing. It allows us to. Worry's not the right word. It allows us to plan better in terms of how we'll fund new school construction and not be tied to some predetermined formula. It's more flexibility for us, which is a good thing. And then the last bullet also does provide us more flexibility. And I see this added into statute as one sentence this year. To me, it tells me that somebody understands that the operating budget within school districts is getting more and more restricted. So this says that salaries and benefits for employees whose jobs support capital outlay funded activities can also be paid from capital outlay funds. Now, all districts do something called a maintenance transfer, where they take from their capital budget some dollar amount to help cover the cost of maintenance salaries, which has been allowed in law all along. This House Bill 1 opens that up to any other salary and benefit when that job supports activities funded under the 1.5. So as an example, school buses are purchased out of 1.5 capital outlay. That means salaries and benefits of folks who work with school buses and who are in the school bus transportation business can be paid for from capital outlay funds now. IT, technology, computers. If we purchase computers and technology out of capital outlay funds, then the salaries and benefits of people who support those purchases can also be paid from capital outlay funds. So it's flexibility to allow us, at least for the short term, in a period of time when our capital outlay budget, our 1.5 budget, is robust. And again, the sales tax has allowed us to do so many things that we can provide Julie and the school district some flexibility by funding certain salaries out of capital outlay.
Well, and I think we may be, if I could say, forced to access this, given the 1,700 students that you mentioned earlier and the funding associated with that.
And so even if it's the sales tax money, not the regular capital we get, we can use it?
Sales tax money, no ma'am, separate side.
That's a whole different thing.
So the 1.5 capital
Oh, the
outlay
1.5,
funding.
okay.
Yeah, very clear on that.
Okay.
So, and certainly we've got to continue to do work on our capital outlay program. We're going to continue to purchase school buses, so we wouldn't be able to do anything that cripples the capital outlay budget. But you're right, Dr. White. I think there's a recognition that funding and operating school districts is getting tougher to do. So this is kind of a little bit of a pressure release valve that they've put into statute to allow us.
Yeah, but even though we couldn't use the sales tax money, it's doing so well, that's taken some of the pressure off our other capital money, so that frees it up.
Correct.
Because we've done so well with the sales tax.
You're right. If not for the sales tax and the proceeds from that,
But
we
it-
may not be looking at this as it's a flexibility, but we may not be able to take advantage of it.
Right.
But you're right.
Good stuff.
And as we come to a close on this, I do want to say to the board, I thank our departments, Mr. McGinnis, and those in those departments going through, this bill and the countless others. As you know, they're not short documents, and making sure that we're prepared for this. And I do want to thank Representative Rudman and Maney, Senator Broxson, and Trumbull, as well as others. It's nice when you can send them the information, but it's even nicer when they take your call and talk about these. So I just appreciate the work that they've done and working with us, and we'll see how it all unfolds in another few weeks, but I do appreciate the access to them and being able to share our thoughts.
Absolutely. It makes such a difference, that personal touch with each of them, and the fact that they appreciate our district and what's happening here. So that brings us to section 13, board members' announcements and requests for information. And let's start with Ms. Evanchik.
Okay, great, thank you. Couple of things out of Baker. Tonight is a reading night that's open for secondary parents. They're going to talk about what assessments are coming up in the area of reading or language arts, and what to expect and those kind of things. They're also hosting an elementary science night coming up on the 13th. So some good things out there at Baker. Congratulating both the girls and boys track teams who took first place at the J Invitational last week. Happy for them. Over at Florosa, Florosa has a large population of military dependents, and we are in, the month of the military child. But they have different events going on this week, with Friday being Purple Up Day. But one of the neat things they did this past week was they invited active duty female members of the Air Force to come and speak to their 5th grade girls about what it's like as a female in the armed services. And I think that's really telling to get to speak to those, so that was exciting. All right, on the foundation front, we are still getting geared up for pickleball. Not too late, Mr. Bryant, to go ahead and get in on that. We've got, Mr. Horton just told me this morning, we have some wonderful sponsors. Our communities just show up for us. It's amazing. But we still have time to have some more players in, and any business out there that would like to be sponsored, because at pickleball you get a big sign, people see your name, and that's great. So contact the foundation at 833-5856 and talk with Debbie Tate. One other thing I want to talk about is a local business person that does a fantastic thing. I don't think we've ever mentioned it before, but this fellow named Joey Tinklepaw, who owns Joey the Jeweler here in Crestview, but he actually is a Baker grad. He actually makes a necklace with, looks kind of like a little, what you used to call dog tags, whatever. It's beautiful, though, for every senior in Okaloosa County Schools. All you have to do is request it, and he will make it. It'll have their picture, and it'll have their school, and all this, and it's free of charge. It's something he does as a community service. So I just want to shout out to him. He is, like I said, a Baker graduate, and he's just one way he wants to give back to the community. And he's got it advertised on all his social media, that you just call and do that. And I think that's fabulous to do that. So thank you. That's what I have.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Evanchik. Mr. Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll have more tonight regarding construction and everything, but just real quick, I wanted to give a shout out to our public information officer, who's sitting right over in the audience. We had a great meeting at Crestview High School with one of our community members who's on the advisory committee for the half-cent sales tax. And Ms. Carr did a great job of walking me and Mr. Carroll around the construction sites, and I think she's putting together a little montage of all these visits, so look forward to seeing what she has in store there. But we do appreciate all that Ms. Carr does. She's new to the school district, but she's come out running and doing a good job of in her role as public information officer. And I will also have some information regarding tonight, I want to make sure I pronounce the name correctly. The Consortium of State School Boards Association. We had our first meeting last week in Tampa, so I'll have some information about that tonight too.
Great, good. Thank you.
Dr. White.
Yes, I too will have some more remarks tonight, but just to say that I'm looking forward to the superintendent's fireside chat at Choctawhatchee. And I'll certainly be there and looking forward to see what those students have to say and the other issues and their concerns as well.
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you, Dr. White. So I have a few things to say. First of all, I'll start with the sad news. I'd like to offer condolences to the families of Bobby Smith, a longtime principal in our district, and Dr. Naomi Barnes as well, and to the husband of Mary Gunter, John Gunter, who passed away recently in our district. And we all stand on the shoulders of great leaders like these who once served in our district. So I just want them to know that we honor them and we think about them. And then I'll move into some announcements. I thought this was neat since it was Autism Awareness Month. Our Niceville High School baseball team served as buddy players with the Panhandle Area Little League Challenge Division at Rarick Little League Park in Niceville. And I thought that was just a phenomenal process to see our guys acting as hosts and interacting with those students with disabilities with acceptance and understanding. And so those young people who went out of their way to show dignity and to ensure that each of those other participants had a positive experience, I think they deserve kudos for that. And just a reminder that our district is in a phase of kindergarten registration for next year. Those young students need to be 5 years old by September 1. And I also had, again, the opportunity of serving as the MC at the Twin Cities Honor Choir presentation, and those were great performances. If you had a chance to go, you know what I'm talking about. So I offer thanks again to those directors here in our area under the direction, in general, under Barry Blackburn of Bluewater Bay Elementary School. And then I'll end with, just so that you're not disappointed in me, this leaves us after today 45 days until the last day for students, and that means about 51 days till the last day for teachers. We are just rolling on towards the end of the school year. It's gone by very, very quickly.
Dr. Kelly, if I could add just one thing. I know you were talking about thoughts and prayers for some employees that
Yes.
we've lost. I also like to recognize that Carol Parham at Davidson
Yes,
Middle
thank
School
you. I
passed
had her
away.
name down, too.
And her
Thank you.
service was actually the other day. So our thoughts and prayers to all of these folks that are dealing with loss at
Thank you.
this time.
Yes,
ma'am.
thank you for that reminder.
Dr. Kelly, I have one more thing. I wanted to ask the superintendent to talk. I am so excited about that scholarship that you're able. Could you speak to that, please, sir?
So this is a state scholarship, and it allows superintendents to have a process in place where students who are thinking about getting into education have an $8,000 scholarship that in essence is waiting for them. So, feel blessed to one, that the state sees the need to get more and more students thinking about education earlier, but two, to be able to deliver this to a deserving family, I think is going to be spectacular.
I know, I'm excited about it. That's good. We've not done that before, so that's,
No, ma'am.
that's very good.
That is pretty awesome. Anybody from the union side have any comments or announcements? Greg? No? Jordan didn't. Anybody on the staff side? No? All right, so that would bring us down to section 14, which would be the yellow card version of our public comment. And section 15, public hearing. 15.1, public hearing for adoption of a new job description for ESE analyst, presented by Dr. Hale. 15.2, public hearing for adoption of a new job description for accounts payable analyst, presented by Dr. Hale. Anything else for the good of the order? No? With that, then, we are adjourned.